Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coaching Beyond the Podium, where we take a look at what it takes to make great humans and amazing athletes. So, we are going to talk about all things coaching here. I am fascinated not only with amazing athletes and how they perform and how they train and the dedication it takes to be one of these athletes, but let's draw back the curtain and look at the coaches that get them there. The coaches that have these plans for athletes to get to see their dreams, plans for the parents to lay out a structure of what it's going to take, short term, long term, at 6 a.m. What does it take to build a great athlete? So let's dive in. I'm going to talk about how I became a coach because I'm sure most of you, if you are coaches, have the same story. If you listen to my last podcast, you can hear about what my life was like growing up as a child athlete, and I really did enjoy it, and I'm super fortunate to do what I do every single day. It's fantastic. It sure makes getting up at 5 a.m. a lot easier. So anyway, I was in college. I was on the 5-year waitress plan. I was paying cash for college, and in that last year, I moved from Delaware to South Carolina. So I was finishing up my degree and my credits were being sent back to Delaware. And I was waitressing. So I waitressed in Delaware at University of Delaware. And then when I moved to South Carolina, I waitressed there as well. I was not as successful, I will say. It was a little different down here, down south. I'll just say, leave it at that. But I really did enjoy waitressing, but couldn't find my niche. I was at the other restaurant for about 4 years. I knew how everything worked. It was very different to be at a new restaurant and try to make my way through and make enough money to pay for college. I was watching Oprah one afternoon, and she had a guest on, I don't remember who, and they were talking about choosing a life path or a career that would be, your dream career. If you could dream it, what would it be? And at that time, I'm waitressing and going to college, and I'm an English major. I don't know what I was going to do. And I thought back to my pre-college days when I was training as a skater, and I was like, that has always been my dream, is to be a coach. So the next day, I went to the local rink and asked to speak to the skate director. But before I did, I skated on the session. Now, this is South Carolina in the 90s, and I went and did an axel, which is not, too typically hard to do. And this beautiful young woman comes up to me and she said, "Your axel's really good." And I had never heard skating terms said in a Southern accent. So I was taken aback, and all I could do is smile and say, "Thank you so much," because, it wasn't a big deal for me, but I was just really amused by that. Anyway, so I asked to speak to the skate director, and he was very busy, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I thought, I'm just going to wait. I think he's on the phone. I think he forgot about me. I must have waited almost an hour. And then he finally came out and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And he greeted me and he was lovely and warm. And he said, "You're looking to be a coach here." And I said, "Yeah, I think it would be pretty great." He asked me what my credentials were. And he said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd won the lottery. I thought this was the best thing that ever happened. So I went home, told my fiance I was super excited that I was going to begin coaching. Okay, great. Now what? How do you start? Who do you coach? How do you get going? How do you get business? I knew none of this. So I started with teaching group classes. I had a bunch of 6-year-old basic one, the very first level young ladies who had no front teeth. So everyone called me Miss Cheryl, because of course we're in the South. This was all new to me. So because they didn't have front teeth, it was Myth Theral. So all the parents thought my name was Michelle. whatever. So anyway, I had a blast teaching them, but again, I had no idea what I was doing. You want to talk about imposter syndrome? Good Lord. I had not a clue. So I just followed the curriculum that we were using at the time and just did the best I could to, herd cats, man, make these kids excited and have fun and learn skills and try to do the best I could and just kind of learn from other coaches. Now, with all that being said, there was a coach that was planning to retire, and she kind of took me under her wing, and I mentored with her, and she handed me all of her students who were doing like double jumps and competing and high level skaters. Now, bear in mind, I'm like 22 years old. I've never coached before. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm like, okay. So then I started coaching immediately at the higher levels. So I'm like, I better read the rule book. I better know what I'm doing. I sat at competitions and watched different levels and took notes to see what would win. So this girl did this, and this in her program. So, and she won. So that means I got to make sure my kids have that. So that was well before US Figure Skating kind of tightened all the rules and put out expectation charts for all the levels. I just kind of did it on my own to kind of figure out how my kids could be at the top of their game when they competed. So one of the things I thought was so fascinating about coaching is I would tell a skater to do something or fix something or change their arm position, and they actually did it. I didn't do that when I skated. I just tried to do it my own way. Yeah, that didn't work. So I just remember being really fascinated with them actually doing what I asked. I was like, oh, well, that's very interesting. So fast forward, so I started coaching in 94 and in the fall of 94. In 95, in May, I joined PSGA. It was the Professional Skaters Guild of America, and now it's called just PSA. They had a rating system where you were given a study guide and you sat in front of three master coaches and passed these ratings. You had to explain how you taught things, draw the pattern on the ice, explain, the common errors, how to fix them, what exercises do you have, ethics, education, everything. You had to memorize the rules. So in 95, knowing not a thing of what to expect or do, I remember it was in the Chicago Hyatt, which is, I think, the biggest Hyatt in the world. I walk in kind of like a country bumpkin. I'm looking around, this huge atrium, and all of a sudden I hear, Keegan, is that you? Yes, it was my coach, Jill, which if you see my last video, you can see a picture of her and our very large hair. But anyway, so Jill grabs me by the hand, like the little Jewish mother that she is, and leads me around, and I felt comfortable right away. So I took my exam and passed, and it was brilliant because they asked me questions about skills that I just taught to an adult skater the night before, which if any of you teach adults, you have to explain everything. Am I breathing in or out when I throw this free throw? Like they ask like crazy questions like that really make you think as a coach. So it helped me learn really quickly how to coach. So if you're ever in doubt, teach adults. They'll ask great questions. So I passed my exam and I was thrilled because I honestly had no idea what they were going to ask. And that just started the ball rolling because they have 4 levels, registered, certified, senior, and master. And I was like, that's it. I want to be a master coach. So in order to become a master coach, you have to have skaters that have tested at the senior level, or you must have tested at the senior level, and you must have taught for 5 years. So by 2001, I had gone through lots of seminars. I worked my way up to getting up to testing my master exam. And it was 2001, and I had done all this prep work. I had invited one of my friends who is a master coach out for lunch to quiz me. And she said, yep, you're ready. And I was like, okay, here we go. So I get there. Of course, I'm so nervous, right? You're just so nervous. You're in front of 3 master coaches, my senior exam, the one right before master that I took, Frank Carroll, Michelle Kwan's coach, was one of my examiners. So he stands up and they always greet the candidate and shake their hand and introduce themselves. He's like, "Hi, I'm Frank Carroll." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Now I have a signature, right? I have a signature on my test paper." So I go into this master exam, and it was in Las Vegas, of all places, and I passed. And it was great. I had a blast. I enjoyed the examiners. They were amazing. And I just was on a high, like of all places to pass in Vegas, right? It's like, yeah, mama's going to the craps table now. It was so much fun. What I have realized now, and that was in 2001, is I have learned more since then. Just because I got to be a master coach doesn't mean I know everything. As a matter of fact, if you do think that, then you are not truly a master. In my opinion, that was just the tip of the iceberg. That was just a good excuse. I was not a great skater, so it was a good excuse for me to get my technique in order and make sure I had common threads in my teaching, that everything built on one another, that I had a lengthy vocabulary and understanding of biomechanics and sport and rules and ethics and all of the education that goes along with it. That was just the tip of the iceberg. What has taught me the most are the parents and the skaters. I swear that I learned something new with every single skater that I coach. I have said very different things in lesson to explain something to an athlete this year alone that I've never said before. I'm like, "I've never said this before, but what do you think about this?" And they'll do it and they're like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense." I'm like, "Okay, well, now I'm going to use that from now on." Or I've even had athletes come to me and say, "Well, I felt this when I did it." I'm like, "Well, I'm going to steal that and use that for my other athletes." You should just never stop learning, in my opinion, whether you're coaching or not. But I will tell you, going back to parents, I've learned so much from the parents because for the longest time I was younger than all my skating parents. And now I'm older than all my skating parents. So that's a little weird for me. But I do find myself parenting the parent. I know a couple of things. I know that you may have one or two or three kids. I have had thousands, right? Don't get me started on middle school girls. Okay, so I can coach you through that. You give them a hug, there's going to be tears, and then give them some chocolate. All right? Don't ask why they're crying. They don't know. So there's lots of all these little tips that I have learned to help parent the parent because they're struggling. Kids aren't born with an instruction manual. You guys are doing the best you can, and I say you guys to parents, to figure out how to make a human. Good Lord, it is not easy. And so I think it's super important that we understand that parents are part of the team. You're part of the team. I'm here to support you. You're here to support me. And we're going to work together to make the best athlete we can, the best human we can, right? So the other thing that I always tell parents, and I think this is really important, is I have your two most prized possessions. I have your kid and I have your money. So I think it's always important to have a sense of gratitude and respect when you're working with parents. I do also think that along with that respect is this. If you hire a lawyer to handle a case for you, they don't get mad at you if you ask questions. You're paying them to do the job, right? So if a parent has a question, that's okay. That doesn't mean that they don't believe you, they don't have faith in you. It's not hurting your ego. It's because the sport that we are in, especially figure skating, I don't know about the other sports, couldn't be more confusing or complex. Can we make it harder? So I teased the parents and said, yeah, they do that on purpose so I have job security. Okay, thanks. So let's dissect it together. Let me explain it. Let me lead you in the right direction. I do think when you take that time to talk to a parent and you show that kind of gratitude and respect, they definitely give it back. I know that I have taught with a broken hip I've taught on a scooter after foot surgery. I've had a cast. I've had walking pneumonia. You name it, I've had it. Recently, I had an infection in my leg. So, and I went to the parents and said, okay, I can do virtual lessons. I can still choreograph on the scooter. I made a library of videos before my foot surgery to show demonstrations of elements for the kids. And the parents were so lovely and gracious and understanding and gave me empathy and gratitude. And it was such a two-way street. And I'm so grateful that it was. And I'm grateful that they were willing to hang in there with me when I haven't always been at my physical best, but I know that I can still perform my job and show up. So I appreciate that. So as I went through my coaching journey, further down my coaching journey, and I am standing side by side with other coaches at competitions and at rinks, I've noticed more and more lately that I'm starting to know everyone, right? So because I've been doing this so long that I see the same coaches, and it's great to see them. And it's also great to see their skaters do well. So a little out of the norm, I started cheering for everyone. And some coaches were like probably a little confused by it, or if I compliment them on their athlete, I'm like, oh my gosh, your dress is amazing. And I'll turn to my skater and I'm like, oh my gosh, isn't her dress amazing? Because guess what? I'm going to be there year after year after year. So are you. The athletes are going to come and go. Let's enjoy each other. Let the athletes enjoy each other as well and appreciate each other and be like, hey, she did that jump really well. If your athlete beats my athlete, okay, more power to you. My athlete needs to work a little harder, or maybe there's something we need to do differently. That's fine. But I think it's critical in any sport. All of us are working hard. All of us are getting up early. All of us are training. All of the athletes are falling. Everyone's struggling to get a clean program done and work really hard. All the parents are spending a lot of money. So you know what? They all deserve to be cheered. I don't care who you skate for. I don't care who you skate with. I don't care when you're skating. You all deserve the praise and accolades because you've all worked hard to be here. Anyway, I could go on and on about skating, and I will in this podcast. But fast forward to the next couple of years, I then, because I got my master in PSA, I then really saw success with my athletes. And it made a big difference when you get a talented athlete and you have your technique set and you have a path and you have a method to your madness. Then you can really fly with your athletes. So the number one thing I can, like advice I can give you as a coach is know your sport. That's kind of the biggest thing. Know your sport. I always say I like to read the rules so I know how far I can bend them. So know your rules so you know your sport, and that way your athlete doesn't suffer. So what if there was a rule that you didn't know about? I mean, I've done this. We've all done it. There was a rule that I didn't realize, and my skater got deducted for it. Luckily, it didn't hinder them from passing a test, but they did get a -1. Well, guess what? I'm never doing that again. So you do have to learn all the time. It kind of keeps you on your toes, and that's the beauty of it. I will say that coaching so many different body types, brain types, family dynamics is pretty fascinating. And I think you really have to just take a step back and look at what you're working with, right? Look at the clay you're trying to model. I go more in depth with all of this in other podcasts and on my YouTube channel, but I will say that I don't think people in general realize the immense amount of coaching it takes to get to the upper echelons of where you want to be. You see the athlete on the Olympics on TV, right? You see them on YouTube. You see them on the Wheaties box. Each one of those athletes has had a team, a whole team of coaches to get them where they are. So that was one athlete. And there are tons of coaches for just that one athlete through their whole career. So when you start to look at the bigger picture and like pan out and see the bigger picture, there are hundreds of thousands of coaches that are making big differences in everyone's lives, just like teachers, right? Just like tutors, just like teachers, just like instructors. But these coaches that are in your kids or your life day in and day out and know the family issues, financial issues, school issues, emotional issues, and we're part of your family, basically. But there are just hundreds of thousands of coaches that go behind making all these athletes. So I'm really fascinated. Like, I think it's amazing to get, I mean, I have Dorothy Hamill, Scott Hamilton, I have their signatures, right? I have their autographs. But to me, I'd rather talk to their coach. I would love to sit down and have a discussion about what they think it takes to get there, or how they thought, the world of coaching has changed since they started coaching. I'll never forget, and this was a huge teaching tool that I use all the time. I was at a regional competition, and there were two World Olympic coaches having a drink at the bar, elderly gentlemen. I won't get into the names. And I know both of them. I mentored with them and became friends with them by going to all of these PSA seminars and learning from them. So they called me over and they said, hey, come sit down and have a drink with us. We were just discussing, they said, how many attempts it takes to get a difficult skill like a double axel or a triple. And their guess was about 8 to 10,000. Later on, I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, and other, Malcolm Gladwell books that talk about the 10,000 hours, right? Or the 10 years or 10,000 hours. And so they were really on to something. This became the basis for me to introduce a hard skill like double axel or triple Salchow. I'll give you an example. I had a young lady say to me the other day, I'm just so sick of working on my triple Salchow. I've been working on it for a year. And I go, okay, how many times a day would you say you were doing a triple Salchow? And she's like, well, maybe 2 or 3, a couple times a week. And I go, okay, well, then you'll probably have one by the time you're married, because it takes, I've done the math, it's 666 a month. It's 25 a day if you skate 5 days a week. And I included off ice and on ice training. So unless you're doing 25 a day, don't expect to get it in a year. So if you're only doing 2 or 3 a year, see you in about 20 years, because you're not going to get it. That's just straight facts. So the more I could use just pure data with the athletes, they then understand that something that seems so esoteric and kind of a thought could become very concrete, and they could make it more attainable. So I have all kinds of tricks like this. Go to my YouTube channel for that. But in this podcast, we're going to talk about what it takes to become a coach, all the things that coaches have to deal with. What do athletes deal with when it comes to coaches? What do parents deal with when it comes to coaches? And I'm also excited to bring you interviews of those types of folks too. So I look forward to seeing you next time. And in the meantime, have a nice day and enjoy your sport.